it's Victoria Price. Thanks for listening to Hide and Seek, a podcast about hiding and seeking and sharing this journey of hiding and seeking. And this week's episode is called Someone Else's Story. So, my best friend came to visit last week, and I took 4 whole days off work. My first staycation, actually, in a year and a half. And we had the most wonderful, wonderful time. Sometimes the two of us can bicker or take a minute to settle into each other's rhythms, but this time it was all easy like Sunday morning. Now, there were actually reasons for that. The most important being presence. We both were truly present with each other and in each moment, and that made all the difference. Really being with and seeing each other. Often when we're together, we're working or trying to cram too much in, but this time we didn't do that, and we felt what a difference that made. After she left, I realized that I had been worried about certain things before she came. Like, would she like where I lived? Or would she see things differently from how I see them? But none of that happened. And now that she's gone, I've had a moment to reflect on our time together. And I saw something I'd never seen before. My whole life, I've been focused on other people's stories about me. Other people's stories about me. What do I mean by that? Their actual stories? Well, no, because how could I really know that? I mean, even if I took every word someone said to me about me and anything I could glean from others about what someone said about me to them, it still wouldn't be someone else's story. It would be what I heard of their story, how I interpreted it, looking for the best or fearing the worst and everything in between. So what I mean by someone else's story is it would be my story of their story about me, which is what I call someone else's story in all capital letters. And I've lived my whole life either resisting or reacting to or trying to realize someone else's story. But during the pandemic, during a year plus of total isolation, I didn't do that as much because I was living in a bubble. And that was a relief. But also, and this is the interesting part, a little bit scary because what I heard and witnessed were a lot of voices in my head that I have drowned out by focusing on someone else's story. And the voices in my head were a weird combo plate of pure joy and gratitude and presence and a bunch of old, nasty, anxious fears, which didn't just politely tap me on the shoulder. No, they clamored for attention and loudly. And yet, and this is the interesting part, at least to me, without someone else's story to distract me, I had to learn how to replace them, those nasty voices in my head, with something bigger. I had to let go of a lifetime of the little I and find my true self with the big T and the big S. Now, for those of you who read my book, The Way of Being Lost, A Road Trip to My Truest Self, you'll know this isn't a new journey. So what made this different? No distractions, that's what. You see, other people's stories about me, about life, purpose, about meaning, about what I was supposed to accomplish or feel or be, those have all been very distracting, conveniently distracting. They have sent me down a lot of roads, made me try to be a lot of different kinds of people, do a lot of things, take a lot of jobs, try to look a lot of different ways. But when you only have yourself to wake up to and go to sleep with and listen to and walk with for a year, then suddenly those options begin to look like the illusions they've always been. And I had to figure out what was underneath all those illusions, what really is real. So what does this have to do with hiding? Well, we don't always hide in a cave or under a rock. Sometimes we hide in plain sight. We learn to be chameleons so that we'll fit in. We morph into someone else's idea of us or life or creativity or parenthood or whatever, and we hide behind that mask. And so to stop hiding means risking showing who we really are, even if who we really are is a messy work in progress, even if who we are doesn't look like what other people think we're supposed to look like. My best friend says that I've changed being here, that I'm kinder and more present and more open-hearted. She shared some stories of things that she asked me to do in the past that I didn't do. And the truly scary thing is, I don't even remember her asking. I don't even remember the incidents. But what I do know is that I don't want to be that person anymore. One of the ways I learned that is realizing that being here, I've had to learn how to make friends in a new way. Because frankly, the old way wasn't working. A way that didn't bring the old stories with me. And so I've been learning that. And then understanding that if I can learn that with strangers, I can learn that with my existing friends. So why does any of this matter? Because most of us aren't at all conscious of how much we march to other people's tunes, how much we read off other people's scripts. And most of those people aren't even alive anymore. They were our parents or our teachers or our parents' parents or our peers way back in the day, whose hiding techniques and coping mechanisms and old stories we inherited without even knowing it. This podcast began as a way of looking at how to be more accountable by emerging back into the world in a way that's conscious and kinder and more connected. Well, if we're not showing up in our hearts as our truest selves, that's never going to happen. We'll be too busy trying to squeeze into some very old outfits in sizes and colors that are so far from who we are that we can't possibly be really and truly present. Instead, we need to wake up every morning and check in every hour and go to sleep each night, asking ourselves who we really are, who we really want to be in the world. How can we show up to one another from our hearts? How can we do better, give back more, be truer to love? After my mother died, I cut off all my hair. My whole life I wanted to have a short haircut, and she would never let me. She told me it wouldn't look good on me, and I believed her. Well, after I cut it off, I loved my short hair for almost a decade. But during the pandemic, it grew out. And then everyone said, I love your hair long, don't cut it. And so I'm not cutting it. But not because of what everyone else said. I'm not cutting it because now I have to find a new story for me. And going back to my old hair, the one before I had short hair, and learning to love it seems like a good place to start. Silly maybe, but good practice. And isn't that all life is? Practice? Practice at being more present. Practice at listening to the truth instead of all the worn out lies. Practice at living lives that aren't based on old stories. Practice at showing up to ourselves and one another right here, right now. Not in the past or the future, but right here, right now, in love. Not hiding our lights, but sharing our hearts. So that's what I'm thinking about this week. And I hope that maybe something I've said resonates for you. What old stories are you ready to jettison? And who would you be without those old stories? Can you coax your true self out of hiding a little more each day that you let go of someone else's story about you? Think about it and practice. And then let's connect next week. So, thank you for listening to Hide and Seek, this podcast about hiding and seeking and sharing about hiding and seeking. Have a great week, everyone. Stop listening to someone else's story about you and be you.